Welcome to Geeksvana Live. Thank you very much for joining me. You can obviously see this evening that I am joined by my co-host Graham. We're going to be talking about a very interesting topic, which has obviously got some ramifications for, in particular, the recreational, the hobbyist flyers here in the UK, as we are looking at a situation where somebody has actually been charged in connection with their drone flight. So it's an interesting one to have a look at, interesting one to see the sort of the feedback from the police in terms of their statement. So I'm going to read through the statement from Derbyshire Constabulary, and then we're going to bring Graham in and we're going to discuss it a little bit as well. If you've got comments on this, I want to hear your thoughts on this story. So do tag at Geeksvana. There you go, Graham. That's how you say it. I'm looking over at his little screen, and let us know, and we will highlight your comments, etc., and discuss this more fully. But for now, let's first start off by bringing up this particular news story. Let me just press here, and there we go. By the magic of the internet, which has failed us this evening twice, but there we go. We will continue no matter what. So from Derbyshire Constabulary, now this has been updated. I'll explain that in a couple of moments. Chesterfield man charged after drone being flown over a football match. So a man from Chesterfield has been charged with several offences in connection with a drone being flown over a football match. Lewis Franks of Allsops Place in Chesterfield is due to appear in Southern Derbyshire Magistrates Court on 8th of June. The 27-year-old has been charged with flying a drone above assemblies of people, flying beyond visual line of sight, failing to register as a drone operator, and failing to display operator ID on the drone used by a remote pilot. Those charges are in connection with an incident at Chesterfield Football Club's Technique Stadium, interesting name for a stadium, at 5:20 p.m. on Sunday the 7th of May, when the match referee took the players off the pitch after a drone was spotted flying above the stadium. Now, there was also a second part of the press release which commented on the fact that there were 14 other charges related to other drone flights carried out by Mr. Franks. That has actually been corrected. Police have actually updated that to basically correct that isn't the situation. So that's an interesting one in itself, that was updated. Whether we'll hear anything more regarding the backstory of that in the future, I'm not entirely sure. Probably not, I would say, in terms of the way things usually run. But there we go. So quite a few specific charges there, quite a few charges that I feel like we're sort of hearing for the first time, a few things that will be passing through court for the first time as well, I feel, and it'll be interesting to see how things are handled. So do let me know, as I say, let me know your thoughts in the chat. We will come back through and have a look, but I'm going to pull Graham in now for the second time. Thank you for joining us, Graham. How are you, sir?
I'm all right. I'm ready for it this time.
Excellent.
I'm ready for it.
Well, thank you for standing in there briefly. I do appreciate it.
That's all right. No I've just noticed in the chat, Ellis, they're at least £1,000 fine. Shall I pop through this?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Potential fines. So I don't know if you know, but if you're looking in Article 265, and there's various A, B, C through to G in the air navigation order, that tells you about the offences and the penalties for breaking effectively. Most of the laws come under the UAS implementing regulations, but here's the juicy bit. Stuff to do with displaying and holding your registration, those come in at a level 3 fine, which is £1,000, and that would be for each offence. So £1,000 for not having the registration, then another £1,000 because you haven't got it, you can't display it. So there's another £1,000. The BV loss and the above flights above assemblies of people, I believe, I'm happy to be told I'm wrong on this, those are operational offences. Those step up to level 4, which is £2,500 for each of them.
Right,
so
crikey.
So total of £7,000. Nice thing is those fines haven't changed since 1992, despite inflation. So
right.
It's the inflation busting fines.
so the Mr. Franks will should the worst case happen, and it's worth pointing out that he is charged. This isn't a conviction, and yeah. I think there are going to be some nuances here which are going to be very interesting, because we always say, I wonder how XYZ would pan out in court. And at the moment, it's magistrates' court. Again, I wonder if it will stay at magistrate court level, and or whether perhaps it might get bounced up. I'm not entirely sure. I think they're fairly within the realms of magistrate for these ones. There's no reckless endangerment and that type of thing, is there? So I think they're certainly within the realms that a magistrate can deal with it. But things like flying a drone above assemblies of people, flying beyond visual line of sight, failing to register as a drone operator, and failing to display operator ID on the drone, as somebody in the chat has said, you're basically missing the absolute basics. We're talking about the absolute basics of every single Geeksvana drone rules video. Every single leaflet you could possibly get your hands on, and pretty much the entire first page of the CAA guidance for registering your drone when you come on the page. Almost everything was breached there. So it's a pretty incredible situation, isn't it?
It is, but as we were saying the other day when we looked at the survey results from the CAA, he's in the majority. He's in the 53%, isn't he? So
yeah, I mean, if you extrapolate out those figures, and that, yeah, I mean, it's always, I always want to know more behind these stories. It's the same as the hurricane flight as well. I always want to know more about who they are. How often they fly drones. Is this something? Is this a hobby for them? Are they just a sort of a rebellious flyer within the hobby, and they don't like the rules and I'll fly how I want to? Or is it just that Argos type buyer, and other retail stores exist that have bought a drone and have no clue, and have, someone that's just decided to fly it up over the stadium, etc., and over the people? I'm always interested in that, because I think it's always a fascinating side of it. I have to say, sometimes I read into it a little bit in terms of the charges, and as with the hurricane one, I feel like they've thrown every charge they possibly could at this gentleman, and therefore perhaps that in itself suggests that the police feel like this wasn't just an education incident issue type thing.
Yeah, possibly, as you say, we don't know, do we? Because it's one of those silly things where if you're going to fly in a high risk manner, or a manner where you're doing multiple wrong things, why would you do that at a football stadium when there's a match on and there are a policeman around?
That's it.
Exactly. Police officers. So yeah, it's that almost points towards ignorance of it all, and just thinking, I've got a drone, I'll stick it over the top. But as you say, the way they've gone for it makes it sound like it's possibly somebody who does know what. But why would you avoid all those nice easy things?
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? It really is incredible. Unless I've heard, if it is the clueless, reckless, whichever, if it is the more sort of reckless criminal type of person, then I have heard, and I do get it in my comments, quite a lot of people saying, hey, don't register, they'll never catch you. And I don't think people realize actually there are so many different ways which they're going to end up getting caught, and so many different ways that they can prove who it was, and that type of thing. One thing which I found of interest, which I'm just going to very quickly pop another web page up, which is this is the BBC report, the BBC News one, which was updated to show that the 14 charges shouldn't have been mentioned in the first place, apparently. But it's interesting that most of the mainstream media have chosen to show the police drone that was flying above the stadium that day, rather than the actual DJI mini drone that the gentleman was flying. And I happen to believe it was a DJI mini because I managed to catch the match live and took a couple of photos myself on my phone. I've since lost those photos, but yes, when it originally happened. So I've seen myself that it was a mini drone being flown, and then this was a second drone that was then flown. Obviously, I presume the police trying to gather evidence and trying to find out where they were, etc. But again, good old UK media having to, if it's anything to do with a drone, we can't possibly show exactly how it is. We have to hype it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Which I really do find that kind of thing highly frustrating. And as Mike Jones is saying, that's a naughty media tactic. That and yeah, I completely agree with you, Mike. It isn't something which is a bit dodgy, isn't it? And Audio Geck is saying it's like driving 60 in a 30 zone without license whilst playing with your phone. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. That it's as you were saying, Graham, it's a strange thing to do without the basics covered. I suppose if you're going to be that stupid, then they may say, hey, what's the point in having all the other stuff? If you're going to have a police chase at 150 miles an hour on the M25, what's the point in having insurance? But actually, when they start to mount up those charges, you'll wish you did have the basics covered, frankly.
So, well, it's like being caught with one dodgy tyre. They'll go round and do £1,000 for each one, won't they? So these things do add up, and it's something I've been mentioning in drone groups for the last 2 years since the ARSA regs came in, and the changes to the ANO, and it became clear that they won't just do you for one. They won't just pick the big one and do you for that. They will just get you for every single one, and you could see how it was going to add up, and it has.
Yeah, it is the snowball effect, isn't it? And it's the snowball effect is something I've talked about a lot in my videos. Where again, feedback we get is that I feel okay breaking these rules because the police have other priorities. There aren't police hanging around each corner waiting for you to check your drone and that type of thing. And no, there aren't. But as I always say to my viewers, it isn't in the good times that all that actually covering yourself, in my opinion, by sticking to the rules helps. It's actually when things go wrong, because that is when you do have that snowball effect, and things mount on top. Certainly this gentleman seemed to be going for some kind of record. It was quite extraordinary to find out that it wasn't even an operator ID.
The other thing is that if you're speeding through a town centre, unless there's cameras there and all the rest of it, so assume you're just speeding on the country road, somebody's got to see you. The police have got to see you and go and catch you. With a drone, you're putting a signal out, and if there happens to be an aeroscope in the area that's looking out and doing some sniffing for whatever reason, and it sees doing something silly, which is completely unrelated, they've got a patrol in the area, then hey guys, you have got a big red blob painted on you, and they know where you are. So
yeah, indeed, and if there is a big difference, and I think it's something that people need to realize as well. There's a big difference between authorities knowing what you're doing and seeing what you're doing, and almost tracking what you're doing and doing something about it. It might not be the priority to go and chase the FPV guy that's flying BV loss without a spotter down the local park, because there's no outcome that's causing a problem from that, so it's not a priority. But then of course when you start doing things like flying over the assemblies of people, etc., that's where it becomes an issue. One thing I think which is worth us discussing briefly, because this is something which actually comes up relatively frequently whenever somebody will put up a picture of Wembley Stadium on Facebook, or a drone photo, or footage, etc. And you tend to get the people reacting saying, oh, you shouldn't be flying over a stadium, and blah 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 blah. And it's kind of it's one of those folklore things which has started to weirdly, and I wish the folklore had started over some of the other rules that people seem to quite happly breach and perhaps having ignorance over. But of course,
following yourself in a car.
Yeah, exactly. But we seem to have the situation here that because DJI decided to geo-lock stadiums, or certainly Premier League stadiums and that type of thing, that people have the impression that you can't fly over a stadium, when of course they're often, unless it's within the realms of an airport at the moment. So in 2023, when this video is going out, there are not specific flight restrictions for stadiums. So actually there are quite a few flights you can do even on match day and things, which would be perfectly legal. Whether they're advisable or not is a completely different picture. But it's an interesting point, isn't it, that this gentleman isn't being charged for flying over a football match or anything to do with the football match whatsoever. It's the assemblies of people and then the BV loss, etc.
Yeah, there is no offence. In fact, yeah, football matches, because they tend to involve assemblies of people, almost have that. I was going to come up with a terrible farming phrase, a ring of repugnance around them, because essentially you can't overfly those crowds. So those crowds essentially make the game itself safe, other than being overlooked. And that's clearly, I suspect the football authorities don't like being overlooked, and it's probably more to do that
Yeah,
than safe on cases.
yeah.
But yeah, it is. It has grown up around football, possibly because one of our sport. I've not set up. There's a 92 club, isn't there? I read about today. People going around getting all 92.
League and Premier League stadiums. Or, yeah. I'm not surprised by that.
I don't do the football.
Yeah, fair enough. I do, but I'm not going to disclose on live on air who I support. Droner Gaming RP, who is one of our US viewers, he's saying, "Are we talking football or soccer?" We are talking football, but yes, as you would call it, soccer. But yes, but anyway, we won't go down that particular rabbit hole this evening. But yes, but no, it is an interesting one in terms of the flight legality and things, because of course there was the flight at Brentford Stadium as well a while ago, which caused a little bit of trouble. And there goes my camera again, so I'm going to switch across to you again if you wouldn't mind continuing for a moment.
That's no problem. I think I went into one or two groups and possibly made myself unpopular on the Brentford one, because I saw a way where it could have been done, what I believe could have been argued as legally, and that was all to do with protection, how many people were in that part of the stadium, and even the visual line of sight could have been taken care of, because there were some nice flats in the corner that had been built. If you had access to the roof, you could possibly do that flight legally. I would not recommend anybody flying over a football match on match day, or football stadium on match day. Really not a good idea. But I like to play sort of little mind games with myself over what can be achieved within the regulations, because that helps you essentially pick holes in the regulations and say, should this be allowed or shouldn't it? I think it's probably not a good idea to be flying over a football pitch. The drone comes down, will it hit a player? Probably not, but if it does, oh my God, think of the consequences to the hobby. Not so much the industry, because the industry tends to be a little bit, I'd like to say, insulated from the impact of incidents like that. But the hobby would be absolutely crucified by that, just because of the amount of media it would garner. Just have a little look at the. So the regulations are very divisive. Yeah, they are. Some argue they're completely unjustified based on the evidence, and yet some people engage in recrimination. Yeah, the question is, are we over-regulated? And I think an awful lot of people seem to think that there has been a real clampdown on regulations over the last couple of years, but actually it's opened up. I mean, previously, prior to the EASA regulations coming in, or the EASA-based regulations coming in, you couldn't fly a 250-gram drone in town. You just couldn't do it. It wasn't allowed.
That's it. So we do have a lot more freedoms, don't we? I think, apologies everybody for the camera going twice. I think actually it's managed to reset itself so that when it overheats, rather than ignoring it, it turns itself off, which is fun and games. All part of the fun of YouTube. So
send you some ice cubes.
Yes, indeed, exactly. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. We will obviously, continue to follow this as the case goes on. It will be interesting to see whether or not there will be a guilty plea or not guilty plea, etc. That type of thing, whether this will get settled, whether it stays in magistrates, etc. There's lots of details which will have fairly significant impact on fairly significant parts of this case. So I think that's going to be an interesting one for sure. But yes, as I say, we will keep you all informed on it. But I think that's about all we have for this evening, basically. Obviously, we would say our recommendation is to go out there, and if you are buying a drone, for the first time, we would recommend that you register it and that you go through to the CAA website and follow the instructions, etc. Yeah. And get to know those rules and regulations, get to know the drone code as much as you possibly can, because that knowledge very well could keep you well and truly out of trouble. Coming up on Geeksvana tomorrow evening, we have a very special interview here in the studio with Chris Gorman, who is known as the Big Ladder. I'm looking forward to chatting with him about his fantastic career as a specialist drone photographer. You will have seen his photos. You probably won't even realize it, but you will have seen his photos in your daily life and across media. He is absolutely prolific in terms of publications. And yeah, so I'm really looking forward to that one. We've got possibly a DJI focused show coming up on Friday. I'm not sure. I haven't completely decided on that one. And then next week, myself and Graham will be returning for a Q&A. And potentially some other bits and pieces as well, which we're very excited about. But yes, big things coming up on the channel, and we will see you next time, and I will see you all tomorrow evening. Thank you very much for joining us, Graham.
No problem. I will see you next week with a different background.
Yes, of course, you'll be on holiday.
Well, so yeah, and doing hopefully an interesting flight on Wednesday. So
indeed,
fingers crossed.
Yes, and I'm off to go and sort my camera settings out. Thank you, everybody. Yeah. See you next time on Geeksvana Live. Bye-bye.
Cheers.